The invasion of Ukraine, though, was an illegal act. It was an invasion of a sovereign territory by a neighbouring autocratic aggressor. You're not defending that, or are you?
What's your point, though?
My point, Ambassador, is a question. Do you, as an ambassador, uphold the principle and support the principle of international law that a sovereign nation has a right not to be invaded by its neighbour? A warm welcome to Carla Sands, who's the former ambassador, American ambassador for Donald Trump to Denmark, live on the line from the Conservative Political Action Conference in Maryland. I've just been reporting on the programme this afternoon that the G7 memorandum, the annual statement, which is in support of Ukraine, it's been happening since the invasion of Ukraine, it's been blocked by the United States, reportedly because America does not like a reference to Russia being the aggressor. What do you make of that?
Well, I haven't had a chance to read it, so I can't speculate, but this is a new day. I will say we had no conversation between U.S. leadership, President Biden, Kamala Harris, and Putin in 3.5 years. So I'm heartened that in this first month of the Trump presidency, we are actually opening a line of communication, because that's the first step in understanding how this peace process will work.
Okay, and I do want to come to that, but let me just put it to you then for your comment as a former serving American diplomat. Russia invaded Ukraine. That is an undeniable, demonstrable fact. And to deny that, well, it may please Moscow, but it diminishes America in the eyes of the free world. What do you say to that?
Well, I say that in 2014, because of the weakness of NATO and because of the weakness of President Obama, Russia actually invaded Ukraine then. So that was 2014. And flash forward, there was no more territory taken under President Trump's strong leadership, because he led with peace through strength. And now under Biden, we saw what happened. Well, President Biden, while he was in office, said at the podium, if there's a minor incursion into Ukraine, we're not going to do anything. He also said, we're not going to sanction Nord Stream 2. Now, that's the Russian gas pipeline that was a cooperation with Germany that my team and I in Denmark blocked, and it was never completed while I was the U.S. ambassador. The only place it wasn't finished, that gas pipeline, was in my area of responsibility. But the third thing, Putin saw the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan under Joe Biden's leadership, and the fact that that was supported by his government. No one resigned over that scandalous and the deadly withdrawal. And so because of that, I think Putin saw American weakness and invaded Ukraine. There's no question that Russia was the aggressor. However, I saw senators on both sides of the aisle ginning up a war between Ukraine and Russia for decades. I was watching them encourage a war.
Ambassador, I could pick on your point about Afghanistan and maybe point out, although I don't think we have time for that now, that it was Donald Trump in the White House who signed the deal with the Taliban to end America's presence in Afghanistan, and Joe Biden carried that out. Arguably, no one came away with very much credit.
But I have to stop you.
Allow me if you would, Ambassador, if you'd allow me for a moment.
And Trump, 1 second, if I may. Yes, he signed it, but he had a plan for an orderly drawdown, and we were going to keep Bagram Air Base, a multi-billion-dollar base that now the Chinese Communist Party has control of. That is a disaster.
Okay. I mean, you'll understand, I don't want to focus that in the limited time that we have now. In the course of your last answer, Ambassador, you said, of course, Russia was the aggressor. Now, if Russia was, of course, the aggressor, for America, for the White House, for the president to deny that, that's surely damaging to America's standing. Maybe you agree with that, because you take the view Russia did indeed invade Ukraine.
Oh, I don't think that it damages American standing at all. I think it damages European standing. Ukraine's part of Europe. I saw the European allies sitting on their hands, not doing anything. I saw them not making an effort, and they're all supposed to have, Ukraine's not a NATO member. I don't believe it ever will be a member of NATO. But those allies nearby, they didn't come to Ukraine's aid. I didn't see them do much of anything for a long time.
The invasion of Ukraine, though, was an illegal act. It was an invasion of a sovereign territory by a neighbouring autocratic aggressor. You're not defending that, or are you?
What's your point, though?
My,
We
well,
all know the facts.
my point, Ambassador, is a question. Do you, as an ambassador, uphold the principle and support the principle of international law that a sovereign nation has a right not to be invaded by its neighbour, not to have its people slaughtered, not to have its citizens tortured, not to have its children abducted? And on that basis, Russia is not only the aggressor, but its behaviour has outraged all norms of international behaviour. I think that's the point of issue here, which seems to be contested by the president just at the moment.
Well, I think what he's looking at is not what has happened, but what can happen going forward. What's happened is a disaster. He wants the killing to stop. The hundreds of thousands of the young leaders of tomorrow are dying in Ukraine on the battlefield from both sides, and even from places like North Korea. This should not be happening. What has to stop is the killing. And so that they have started the conversations after many meetings with Zelensky in Ukraine, and now beginning to have a dialogue and to put the framework together. What are both sides open to? What are the non-negotiables and the negotiables, so that there can begin to be peace? That's the process that never got started in 3.5 years, because I believe there were incentives on all sides to keep this going.
I want to put a question to you and hopefully get a direct answer from you, if it's possible. You refer to the awful death and destruction in Ukraine. It has indeed been hideous. Would it be at all defensible for sanctions to be eased, to be relaxed on Russia, without the question of reparations for those atrocities being addressed, including the murder of innocents and the destruction of property? Reparations before the removal of sanctions. Is that a fair argument?
You know, before I go there, I just want to state for your viewers and listeners that unbelievable, but before the invasion happened, there was a peace deal on the table. Ukraine had agreed to it, Russia had agreed to it, and your former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, hustled over and killed that peace deal. And that the invasion happened soon after that. So this war, this death and destruction of these beautiful Ukrainian cities, of the young men in the bloom of youth, never had to die. There was a peace deal on the table, and Boris Johnson stopped it.
Well, you'll know, Ambassador, that is denied by all sides in Ukraine, and of course by the former Prime Minister. I can't adjudicate on that matter now, but I am interested in your answer as a loyal supporter of President Trump. Are his words defensible in saying that Russia invaded Ukraine, in calling Vladimir Zelensky a dictator when he was legitimately elected, in falsifying the amount that's been expended on the war in Ukraine and the support for? Well, the list of falsehoods goes on and on. It doesn't, I suggest to you, it doesn't do the president a great deal of credit.
So maybe the people of the UK aren't aware of what's happening in the United States, where the USAID money that's been funded and funneling to overthrow governments around the world, it is being uncovered right now by DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk. And the fact is that people in the former State Department, like Victoria Nuland, actually did a color revolution in Ukraine and installed Zelensky as a puppet government. So you can say he was duly elected, but it was actually managed by the US. This is not the kind of election that the UK or US look at as a legitimate election. There's a lot of scandals being uncovered in the United States right now that the UK, if they're allowed to see it with all the censoring that's going on in the UK, sadly, if they're allowed to see it, I hope that they do get up to speed on that. Yeah,
well, you won't be surprised to hear me say I'm not aware of censorship in the UK of the kind you describe. But again, before you leave us, and again, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Indeed. Now, you are a supporter of the president, and I suppose a supporter of the Republican Party, the grand old party, which has changed in character so fundamentally. It is said that the traditional values of the Republican Party, in support of multilateral relationships, in support of the Atlantic Alliance, have been eroded and eroded and eroded. And we now hear that Mitch McConnell, one of the veteran senators of the grand old party, plans not to stand again. What do you say about that? Do you consider that a loss? Is that a loss?
So I thank him for his service. He's in his 80s. It's probably time to pass the baton to someone who is younger and can bring fresh ideas to the Senate. But I think that
how old is President Trump, Ambassador?
Well, I watch him with vigor, and I think that it's not just the person's age, it's their energy. I've never seen someone work as hard as he works or work as many hours as he works. I've seen him in action.
Yeah.
He is more active than most 25-year-old men.
Yes.
So I don't know that it's only age, but I'm glad to see fresh blood go into the Senate. We need more and younger voices. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I really take offense to your idea that the grand old party, as you call it, or the Republicans, that we don't value the transatlantic alliance. We do, but we need partners, non-vassal states. We actually need our allies to be able to be strong and defend their territory and have strong economies. And that just goes to having abundant and inexpensive energy to power their economies. It means having laws that aren't onerous to starting a business. There are a lot of things. If the people of the UK would look at what's happening in the United States and perhaps I'm just throwing it out there, take a few lessons away and increase your economy and increase your defense capabilities, I think we would be better partners across the Atlantic. We love the UK and all of our European allies.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your views with us this afternoon. The Grand Old Party, by the way, is not my name for the Republican Party. I think it originates in your country, but I'm sure you know that. Ambassador, thank you for coming on. That's Carla Sands, who was former ambassador for Donald Trump to Denmark. Now, some of your thoughts are coming in. In no particular order, Karis writes in saying, what a total evasive, a diabolical defence of Russia. God help us all from these sanctimonious, kowtowing reprobates. Well, Betty doesn't seem to be terribly impressed with that. I mean, all views are welcome. If you disagree with Betty, do tell us. Send me a text. And here's another one. I've just learned something astounding. It was all Boris's fault. He went to Ukraine and personally started the war. Well, that clears that one up. A certain dry tone to that. And there's more of the same. Not too many of you seem to be very impressed with the ambassador. If you were impressed with the ambassador, do please write in and engage. We want views from all directions on this programme.